What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Snow White, the musical fantasy film from Disney starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. This, of course, is the live-action remake of Disney's 1937 animated classic, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, their very first animated film, which, of course, was based on the Brothers Grimm's Snow White from the 1800s. Snow White, therefore, not a uniquely Disney property, has been adapted before. Look back on just 10 years ago or so, The Snow White and the Huntsman and its sequel. And this, of course, is the latest in now a long line of Disney live action remake films, which have had a very wide range of quality up and down, trending largely down in the recent years. And this Snow White remake is directed by Mark Webb, most famous for the Amazing Spider Man films. And this film has had a really troubled production. Of course, its release date was pushed back significantly. It was supposed to come out last year, of course. And it wasn't just strike delayed. Of course, this film has had a lot of negative attention, particularly online. A lot of it's super off base and bad faith. I think specifically of the intentionally wrong read of leaked set photos positioning the bandit characters as replacements for the seven dwarves. Yes, the seven dwarves are still in this movie. It's exactly as you remember them. A lot of BS happened with this movie, and unfortunately, that kind of stink on the film seemed to have positioned Disney to pull back on promoting this movie, which is a bit strange because it already was a really expensive production for them. Disney's live action Snow White remake is better than I expected it to be, and frankly, about as good as a Snow White remake could be, because I don't think this is the best material, to be honest. I think Rachel Zegler is quite capable as Snow White. Of course, we know she can sing. Gal Gadot has a lot less success as the evil queen. This movie's biggest sin to me is it frankly looks atrocious. For such an expensive movie, the set design is so uninspired, it's so garish looking, and frankly makes Wicked's production look like Mad Max. Ultimately, these Disney live action remakes have a cap ceiling because they're not creatively interesting, and I think Snow White largely goes through the motions, adds a few more songs, changes some plot points around from what you might remember, and calls it a day. And it gets the job done, it just doesn't exactly wow you in the process. I think for me, the most successful aspect of this film has to be the Seven Dwarves. Obviously they come across as, computer generated because they are. I think the craft actually is pretty strong there because it's a lot of motion capture and even puppeteering as well. So you have different performers overlaid with voices. Jeremy Swift is the voice of Doc, Titus Burgess is Bashful, some other folks as well, obviously filling out the seven. And I think the dwarves are just the most fun to be with. Of course, the hi ho, it's off to work we go scene. We actually watch them go into the mines. Obviously, completely computer generated scene again, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of joyous, and I think Snow White's interplay with the dwarves once she meets them is probably the best aspect of the movie. I think especially her scenes with Dopey early on are actually, quite nice and heartwarming. I think the movie really sags, though, with its whole conflict with the evil queen, played by Gal Gadot, just because I don't know. I just feel like they wanted to give the character more to do. Gal Gadot has her own musical numbers in the movie, but if it's she still feels really thin and kind of held back. Like she's only present in like two or three different sets in the whole movie. I don't know. It just they were the depth that they were attempting to get at. They're kind of lacking with. I think Zegler does a good job with the material she's given. I enjoy her as a performer. I thought she was, of course, tremendous in West Side Story. Also pretty good in Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And as far as being a Snow White, I think she was pretty good. I think she does a good job of, again, communicating the niceness and the kindness that's like a key character trait of Snow White. But again, she has to do this on these really bad green screen sets that have very little design, and we're working off the puppets for the seven dwarves, right? And also she has to kind of do this whole interplay with the bandits, which I think is really, again, kind of half baked, kind of rushed. Like the falling in love with a new character, the head of the bandits, Jonathan, played by Andrew Burnap. Basically, it's this movie's stand-in for Prince Charming. And again, I don't really mind the change. I know some of the commentary about that change got a lot of people riled up for stupid reasons. But, I think all of that really, really doesn't matter. It's more so that, like, whether it was the Prince character before, this new Jonathan character now. A lot of that stuff just really thin. Frankly, as I was watching the movie, I was having a hard time remember like what are the key plot points of Snow White 1937 compared to say like Sleeping Beauty or Beauty and the Beast. I was kind of mixing them all up in my mind because they're not exactly films I revisit all the time. But yeah, I thought it was like totally like fine and serviceable, but not outstanding or great in any respect. So given, the massive budget and the huge PR kerfluffle that the movie has caused, not the best result, but I'll be curious about the box office with this movie. It seems like it's, going to open on the low end, especially compared to the other Disney live action remakes. It sounds like it's going to be around 50 million, give or take. But I would not write that off in the slightest. We can look just a few months ago to Mufasa the Lion King, which opened soft around the Christmas corridor behind Sonic 3, and then legged out like a motherfucker well beyond the holiday corridor to a really healthy box office. So I think Snow White has great potential to do that. Maybe not to the same, box office legs degrees, but I would expect this movie to perform well in the weeks to come, even if it has a smaller opening than previously expected. And then, of course, as far as the Disney live action remakes go, it seems like Disney is largely moving away from these. I forget the name, but whoever was like the film executive at Disney that was shepherding them is no longer, running the show here. Remember, a lot of these films were put into, works long ago. In terms of what's upcoming, you have Lilo and Stitch remake that's coming out this May, very soon. And then, of course, we have the Moana live action remake with Oli Carvalho and The Rock coming out next summer, which, of course, is already being filmed. After that, though, that's currently it. Like, there's been stuff that's been announced as in development, and there's a lot of them, but I think a lot of these are probably on the back burner or canceled at this point. I mean, things that have been talked about was a Hercules with Guy Ritchie, a Robin Hood remake, Aristocrats with Questlove, a Bambi remake, which is I was talking about years and years ago, and then also a Tangled remake with Michael Gracie. I think the Tangled remake is probably the one that's most likely to happen. This was actually the one with the most recent news. This was announced last December, so just a few months ago. And I think that one actually is a great candidate for this treatment. If you're not going to make a Tangled 2, like a Tangled animated sequel, a live action remake of Tangled, I guess, makes some sense because that's a movie that was always remarked upon as underrated by Disney fans, but has found a huge life on Disney Plus since Disney Plus came to be, similar to how Moana became a behemoth because of Disney Plus, right? So, again, these are craven, unnecessary films, but if you're going to make them, Tangled's actually a decent candidate. Similar to how Lilo and Stitch is actually kind of a decent candidate as well. So, we'll see about all that. But let me know, what did you think of Snow White? Were you mildly surprised by the film's quality, given low expectations going in like me? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.